Every eFootball player has been there. You spend weeks building your dream squad. You sign the best players. You save coins for epic cards. You choose the perfect manager. You tweak your formation, your play style, your tactics. Then you jump into an online match, and within 15 minutes, you're losing to someone whose team looks average. No flashy skill moves, no impossible dribbles, no overpowered exploits. Just better football. Somehow, they're always one step ahead. Their passes seem easier, their attacks look effortless, their defenders are never out of position, and every mistake you make feels like it was predicted before you even made it. So what's actually happening? Is it luck? Or is there something else entirely? Most players spend their time searching for the next meta, the best formation, the strongest manager, the newest player card. But if football history has taught us anything, it's that great football was never built around a formation. Managers like Johan Cruyff, Arrigo Sacchi, José Mourinho, Pep Guardiola, and Carlo Ancelotti all won playing completely different styles of football. Yet all of them understood the same fundamental truths about the game. Not tactics, principles. And here's the interesting part. Those same principles don't disappear just because football is being played with a controller instead of boots. The pitch is still the same. There are still 22 players. There is still only one ball. And the same decisions that separate world-class footballers from average ones. So this isn't a video about hidden mechanics, or broken formations, or the latest meta. Instead, we're going back to the foundations of football itself. Because once you understand these 5 principles, you won't just see football differently. And the first principle begins with a surprisingly simple question. What is the most valuable thing on a football pitch?
Most people answer that question instantly. The ball. It's an obvious answer. After all, football is played with a ball. You can't score without it. You can't pass without it. You can't win without it. So naturally, the ball must be the most valuable thing on the pitch. Except, it isn't. The most valuable thing on a football pitch is space. That might sound strange at first, because when you watch football or play eFootball, your eyes naturally follow the ball. Where is it? Who's controlling it? Where is it going next? Think about the goals you concede in eFootball. Did your opponent score because they had the ball? Or because one of their players found space behind your defensive line? Think about the goals you miss. Is it because your striker couldn't shoot? Or because every passing lane was already closed before the ball even reached him? The ball is only a tool. Space is the objective. And the best players understand this instinctively. Watch an inexperienced eFootball player. The moment they lose possession, they sprint directly toward the ball. Every defender rushes to the same area. The midfield collapses. The defensive shape disappears. Now watch a top-ranked player. They don't chase the ball. They protect the spaces that matter. Because they know something many players don't. The ball moves faster than any footballer ever can. If you spend the entire game chasing it, you're already too late. This idea isn't new. In fact, some of football's greatest coaches built entire philosophies around it. Johan Cruyff believed football wasn't really about passing. It wasn't about dribbling, and it certainly wasn't about individual brilliance. At its core, football was a game of creating and exploiting space. Pep Guardiola later expanded that philosophy through positional play. Many people think Guardiola's teams pass the ball endlessly because they enjoy possession. That's not the reason. Every pass has a purpose. Every movement has a purpose. Every player's position has a purpose. They're constantly stretching the pitch, pulling defenders away from dangerous areas, creating passing lanes that didn't exist just a few seconds earlier. They're not looking for the ball. They're creating space for the ball to arrive. That's a completely different way of thinking. And it's exactly the mindset that separates average eFootball players from elite ones. Most players ask, where's my teammate? Elite players ask, where will the space appear next? That single change in perspective transforms everything. Instead of forcing risky through balls, You move a defender first. The funny thing is, the player who creates the goal often never gets credited for it. A winger staying wide, a striker making a decoy run, a midfielder drifting into a half space. Sometimes those players never even touch the ball, but without their movement, the goal never happens. The same thing happens in eFootball, a battle for space. Once you start seeing that, you'll notice something fascinating. The highest rated eFootball players rarely look rushed. Not because they react faster, but because they're already moving toward the next space before everyone else realizes it's about to open. And that leads us to the next question. If space is football's most valuable resource, how do elite players recognize it before everyone else? That's the second principle. If space is football's most valuable resource, then another question immediately follows. Why do some players always seem to find it first? Think about the best opponents you've ever faced in eFootball. They're not necessarily faster with the controller. They don't always have better dribbling. They don't even use more skill moves. Yet somehow, they're already making their next pass before you finish deciding what to do. It's almost like they're reading your mind. Of course they aren't. They're reading information. And that's one of the biggest differences between an average player and an elite one. Most players react to football. The best players anticipate it. That might sound like the same thing. It isn't. Imagine you're defending. Your opponent's midfielder receives the ball facing forward. What's your first instinct? Rush him, win the tackle, get the ball back as quickly as possible. But before you even press, the ball has already been played around you. Now you're out of position. Your midfield has a gap. Your center back steps forward, and suddenly, you're defending a 3-on-2 attack. The mistake wasn't your tackle. The mistake happened several seconds earlier. You reacted to the ball. Your opponent reacted to the information around it. Elite players are constantly collecting information before they ever touch the ball. Where is the nearest defender? Who's making a run? Which passing lane is opening? Which one is closing? If I receive on my left foot instead of my right, what changes? Every one of those questions is answered before the first touch. Watch players like Xavi, Luka Modric, Rodri, or Sergio Busquets. People often describe them as calm. But calm isn't really the right word. They're prepared. Studies have shown that elite midfielders scan their surroundings far more frequently than amateur players. They aren't staring at the ball. They're repeatedly checking over their shoulders, gathering information about teammates, opponents, and available space before possession even arrives. By the time the pass reaches them, the decision has already been made. The ball simply catches up to the decision. The same habit separates the best eFootball players from everyone else. Think about what most players do while attacking. Their eyes stay glued to the football. They watch the player they're controlling. They sprint, they dribble. Then they panic when a defender appears. But top players aren't watching the player with the ball. They're watching everyone else. They're looking for movement. They're constantly asking one question. What changed? Because football is a game of constant change. They've already seen your movement. Before you close one passing lane, they've noticed another opening somewhere else. They're not reacting faster than you. They're reacting earlier. Try this in your next few eFootball matches. Before receiving every pass, don't look at the ball. Look somewhere else. Check your striker. Check your winger. Check the opponent's defensive line. Notice who's stepping forward. Notice who's drifting wide. Notice which midfielder has stopped tracking his runner. Then receive the ball. You'll discover something surprising. The game suddenly feels slower. Not because the game changed, because your information changed. Football has an interesting relationship with time. Average players believe time is something you have. Elite players understand time is something you create. And that's why the very best players always seem composed under pressure. They're not making decisions under pressure. They're making them before the pressure arrives. Once you understand that, you stop trying to improve your reactions, and you start improving your awareness. Because awareness is what creates better decisions. And better decisions lead you somewhere even more important. After all, seeing space is one thing. Knowing where to be is something else entirely. And that's where the third principle begins. Position beats skill. By now, we've established two things.
Football is a battle for space, and the players who collect the most information usually find that space first. But finding space isn't enough. Someone still has to occupy it. And that's where most eFootball players make their biggest mistake. They fall in love with skill. More epic players, higher ratings. It's easy to believe that football is simply a contest between individual players. But football has never really worked like that. Because 11 average players standing in the right places will almost always beat 11 great players standing in the wrong ones. Think about this. Have you ever faced an opponent whose team wasn't particularly impressive, yet every time you pressed them, they somehow had another passing option? You closed one lane, another one appeared. It felt like they always had one extra player. They didn't. They simply had better positioning. One of the greatest tactical revolutions in football came from a very simple belief. Former AC Milan manager Arrigo Sacchi famously argued that football should never be understood as 11 individual players. Instead, it should be seen as one connected system. If one player moves 5 meters, the entire team's shape changes. That's why elite teams often look synchronized. Not because they're following a script, but because every player understands where they should be in relation to everyone else. This is why triangles appear everywhere in football. Watch Barcelona. Look closely and you'll notice something. The player with the ball almost always has at least 2 passing options. Those passing lanes don't magically appear. They're created by positioning. Now imagine that same teammate takes just 3 steps sideways. Nothing else changes. Same player, same pass, same defender. But suddenly, the passing lane opens. 3 simple steps completely change the attack. Not because of better passing, better positioning. How often do you accidentally bring 2 attackers into the same space? It happens because most players only think about the footballer they're controlling. Elite players think about the footballers they aren't controlling. They're constantly asking themselves questions. They're managing the entire team's shape, not just one player. That's one of the biggest mindset shifts you'll ever make in eFootball. You stop trying to beat defenders and start trying to move them. Because defenders aren't defeated by dribbling alone. They're defeated by decisions. Football isn't about finding perfect solutions. It's about asking your opponent difficult questions. A perfectly timed run is often more dangerous than a perfectly executed skill move, without ever touching the ball. The funny thing is, most of the best football you will ever play in eFootball, it won't look spectacular. It won't be filled with rainbow flicks or impossible dribbles. It will look simple. Simple passes, simple movement, simple decisions. Because simplicity is usually a sign that everything happened before the ball arrived. The hard work was done through positioning. And once your positioning becomes automatic, something else starts to change. You stop forcing attacks. You become comfortable waiting. Because sometimes, the best decision in football is to do absolutely nothing for a second. And that's the 4th principle. Patience beats speed. If you've ever watched your own replays in eFootball, you'll probably notice something. Most of your mistakes didn't happen because you made the wrong pass. They happened because you made the right pass. Too early. That's one of the hardest lessons to learn in football. Just because an opportunity exists doesn't mean it's the right time to take it. Most players confuse playing quickly with playing fast. Those aren't the same thing. Elite football isn't always played at high speed. It's played at the right speed. Think about Andres Iniesta. He wasn't the fastest player. Luka Modric isn't the fastest player. To someone who doesn't understand football, it almost looks lazy, but there's a reason for it. They're waiting. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they know exactly what they're waiting for. Football is a game of provoking reactions. Every defender has a decision to make. The moment a defender commits, something else becomes available. And the best players know that sometimes, doing nothing is what forces the opponent to do something. Imagine you're attacking an eFootball. Your winger receives the ball on the touchline. The defender is standing 2 meters away. Most players immediately sprint, or instantly attempt a through ball, or cut inside as quickly as possible. They're trying to beat the defender before the defender has actually made a decision. Elite players often do the opposite. They slow down. They hesitate. They take one extra touch. Not because they're indecisive, but because they're waiting for information. That 1 second of patience often creates far more danger than 3 seconds of sprinting. Football has rhythm. Acceleration only matters because deceleration exists. A pause only matters because movement follows it. That's why elite players constantly change tempo. Fast, slow, fast again. It's unpredictable. Defenders love certainty. If they know you're going to sprint, they'll simply run with you. But if they don't know, they hesitate. And hesitation is one of the most valuable things you can create in football, because hesitation creates mistakes. This is something Carlo Ancelotti's teams have mastered for years. People often describe Real Madrid as calm under pressure. But calm isn't really the right word. They're patient. They don't force attacks simply because they have possession. They wait until the defense loses its shape. Then, they attack with incredible speed. The acceleration only works because of the patience that came before it. The exact same principle applies in eFootball. Watch lower division matches, and you'll see players holding the sprint button almost constantly. Eventually, they run straight into defenders. Now watch a top-ranked player. They're constantly changing pace. Sometimes, they'll recycle possession instead of forcing a risky pass. Sometimes they'll turn backwards. Not because they're wasting time, but because they're manipulating the defense. Every recycled possession slightly changes the defensive shape. Then suddenly, one defender steps out, one passing lane appears, one run goes unnoticed, and the attack explodes. It looks effortless, but it wasn't fast football that created the chance. It was patient football. One of the biggest mistakes players make in eFootball is believing they need to attack the moment they win possession. You don't. Winning the ball gives you an opportunity. It doesn't give you an obligation. Sometimes the smartest attack starts by slowing the game down. Because football isn't a race to the opponent's goal, it's a process of creating the right moment. And once you understand that, you begin to realize something even more important. Having the ball doesn't necessarily mean you're controlling the match. Some teams dominate possession and still lose. Others spend most of the game without the ball and look completely in control. Which raises one final question. What does it actually mean to control a football match? That's the fifth and final principle. Control beats possession. Ask someone who's new to football what it means to dominate a match, and they'll probably say the same thing. Have more possession. It's an easy assumption to make. If your team has the ball for 70% of the game, surely you're in control, right? Not necessarily. Some of the greatest tactical battles in football history have been won by teams that barely had the ball at all. José Mourinho built entire careers around this idea. Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid frustrated some of the best attacking teams in Europe with disciplined defending and ruthless efficiency. They weren't trying to have more possession. They were trying to have more control. And those are two completely different things. Possession simply tells you who has the ball. Control tells you who decides what happens next. Think about an eFootball match you've lost. Maybe you finished with 65% possession, more touches, more build-up play. Yet somehow, your opponent had the better chances. Every attack they made looked dangerous. Every mistake you made was punished. That's because while you controlled the ball, they controlled the game. Football is full of invisible pressure. Every decision your opponent makes should feel uncomfortable. If they pass backwards, good. If they're forced toward the touchline, good. If their striker has no safe option, even better. Making your opponent play the pass you wanted them to play is already a victory. That's control. Elite defenders understand this better than anyone. Watch the very best center backs. They don't dive into tackles every few seconds. Instead, they quietly remove options. One passing lane disappears, then another. The striker is forced wider. The attack slows down. Eventually, the only remaining pass is the risky one. And that's when mistakes happen. Top eFootball players defend in exactly the same way. Lower division players often chase the football. They sprint directly toward whoever has possession. If the opponent escapes the press, their entire defensive shape collapses. Elite players are different. They stay patient. They switch players carefully. They cut passing lanes. They're not obsessed with winning the ball immediately. They're obsessed with controlling where the opponent is allowed to play. The goal is to reduce your opponent's choices until every move benefits you. Football works the same way. Every good defensive action removes another possibility. Eventually, your opponent runs out of good decisions. That's when matches are won. Ironically, the best defending often doesn't look dramatic. No sliding tackle, no spectacular save, no heroic last-minute block. Just quiet control. The attack slowly suffocates before it ever reaches the penalty area. The same principle applies when you're attacking. Control isn't about endlessly recycling possession. It's about making your opponent defend on your terms, moving them from side to side, dragging midfielders out of shape, pinning defenders deep. You're not simply trying to score, you're deciding how the game is being played. And once you can do that, the scoreboard usually takes care of itself. Because that's what elite football has always been. Not a competition to see who touches the ball the most, a competition to see who controls the decisions. If you've made it this far, thank you, because this wasn't really a video about eFootball. It was about understanding the game that inspired it. Football has changed dramatically over the last 100 years. Formations have evolved, rules have changed, new tactics have emerged. Technology has transformed how we play and analyze the game. But these 5 principles have remained remarkably consistent. Space, information, position, patience, control. Whether you're watching the Champions League or playing an online Division 1 match, the players who understand these principles will almost always have the advantage. So the next time you lose, don't immediately blame your team, or your luck, or the latest update. Watch the replay. And once you start seeing football this way, you'll never look at the game the same again. If you enjoyed this documentary and you'd like to see more videos that explore the deeper side of football and eFootball, not just the meta, but the ideas behind the game, I'd really appreciate your support. Leave a comment and let me know which of these 5 principles change the way you think about football the most. If there's another football topic you'd like me to break down in this style, I'd love to hear your suggestions. And if you found this video valuable, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.